Hi everybody, we're back teaching today on Revelation chapter 11. We're going to be going over nations, tongues, and kings, Mount Sion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the prince in Ezekiel's temple. We need to know that, who he is, and types and shadows. And these are all really important to chapter 11. If you don't get these, you won't get chapter 11. So you can go to my channel or my website, scarsforthomas.com. And we're going to start here at the end of chapter 10 where we left off in the last one. And he said unto me, thou must prophesy again before many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So we had that once and again. And we realized that the once was to the Jews only, and then the again is to the many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So we know that the second half of this, or the again part, this new prophecy, is to many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So it's not just to the Jews, it's to all the nations or all the people. So we went through the little book and all the different things that are encompassed into the little book. But we just want to remember that of all these things, there's really maybe a narrow focus of really what it's mostly about. Even though it has a lot of these different things in it, it's mostly about just one thing, and that's what we want to narrow down here. And so if there was a big book that was to one nation, then the little book would be to many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So we know that this little book is mostly to all the nations, and that's what it's to. All the nations, not just one nation. So that's why he says this here, because it's in opposition to just being about one nation. It's about all the nations. So if the little book represents something big, and meaning many nations, that's something big. So this little book is for many nations, so all the nations. So that means something little represents something big, which just like the 3.5 years. So in the same respect, we're looking at 3.5 years of things in this chapter that are small that represent something big. We see this over and over in the book of Revelation. You see the candlestick. The candlestick represents, or the 7 candlesticks in chapter 1 and 2 and 3, represented the churches. So a candlestick represents a whole church. Or a lamb represents Christ. Christ is something way bigger than a lamb. Way bigger, he's God. So we're looking at things that are small that represent something big. And this is a common thing in the book of Revelation. That not necessarily the size of something matters what it is. We see the candlesticks in chapter 4 and 5. The candlestick there represent maybe the Holy Spirit, which would also be something really big. So the way my view is that I'm looking at what this chapter here is about is basically 1/7 of the whole entirety of the book. So in other words, if the first 6 are about one nation, then only 1/7 of it would be about the many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. That would make sense that it's a small book or a little book, because it's only about 1/7 of the book of Revelation as a whole. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in other words, 6/7 of it are about the nation of Israel. And then 1/7 of it is about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So that would be a small portion of our little part of the book of Revelation. So in Revelation 10, we looked up at this where it said the sealing up of things. And we know that those things that were sealed up, because this is all part of the transition. Chapters 10 and 11 are part of that transitional phase. So they're sealing up things. This is the first time something's being sealed up. And we know that, so sealing up the 7 thunders, so that you don't write them. Why? Why would you seal them up? And for right now, why would you seal them? Because it's not going to happen right away. It's something to happen later. We see this in Daniel. He says, shut up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Shut up the words and seal the book, even unto the time of the end. So he's saying that something's going to happen a long time from then. So that's why you seal something up, because it's not for right away. This is in opposition to what we've looked at in the book of Revelation, saying the time is at hand. And at the very end, he says, seal not the sayings of this book, for the time is at hand. So 6/7 of this or most of the book of Revelation is not to be sealed. But there's this 1/7 of it that is for a time later. Or the seventh seal, trumpet, angel voice, bowl or vial. Those are all those are going to be later. That's a time at the end. So, but most of the book of Revelation is not to be sealed up. So that's what we're looking at here. And we've talked about the futurist and the full preterists, how they don't see this here. They're not seeing what's happening here in chapter 10. That's why they're off the road. They're off the ditch. Why? Because they think, the futurist thinks everything in the book of Revelation is not sealed up, or it's not, time is at hand. And then the full preterist thinks everything in the book of Revelation already happened, where that's the opposite of what's going on here in chapter 10, what he said, seal up this last part, the part from the second half of the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet. So the second half of the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet are to be sealed up. Those things are happening at a later time. So we looked at this once again, the once was to the Jews only, and then this prophecy is to all nations, tongues, and kings. When we were in chapter 5, they were saying, has redeemed us by God out of every kindred, tongue, people, nation. So there's always parts of Revelation that are about everybody, and not just the Jews, or just about 70 AD, for instance. There's always parts of Revelations that are that. And we were talking about this. We were redeemed in the Spirit in chapter 5. He's talking about people who are already redeemed. Our spirits are already redeemed. Christ already made us kings and priests. It's part of the already and not yet. There's another part that's a not yet. We're going to get to that. Chapter 11, we're going to get to this where it says the nations were angry. So it's still about the nations, a whole bunch of people. This is in this, again, part, this small book. Something small represents something really big. And power was given to all kindreds, tongues, and nations. This is in Revelation chapter 13. Once again, this is talking about the same time period. And we're going to go, because it repeats itself. We're going to see that the book of Revelation just repeats itself over and over and over. It goes through the story, it goes through the story again, it goes through the story again, and it gives different clues. And it jumps in at different time periods, and it doesn't follow chronologically. And when we get to chapter 13, we'll go over it more. Chapter 12 too, we'll go over this and how it happens. But the only time we see this church age is mentioned is in those chapters, is 11, 12, 13. Okay? Chapter 17, again, we're talking about peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So all of these are, again, about all nations, all tongues, all kings. So all over, not just one restricted area. So 1/7 of the book of Revelation is about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. At the end of chapter 10, he said, and he said unto me, who is the he there? I just want to remind you of these because I want to make a point here. He said, and he said unto me, who said that? The angel did. The angel clothed with a cloud. That's who said that. And he said unto me, thou must prophesy again. Right? So it's the very end there. So if we know who that is speaking, then we know who's speaking in Revelation chapter 11. I'm going to show you. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished. At the end of this little book, the mystery of God is finished. So we know that there's still mystery in this time period of the chapter 11. It isn't finished. It's not finished until the seventh angel sounds. That's when the mystery of God is finished. But until then, you still have mystery, and we most certainly still have mystery now. So at the start of chapter 11, verse 1 is the start of this new prophecy, this prophesying again. And then the end of it is when the seventh trumpet sounds at the end of the whole chapter. That's the whole thing. It's the whole prophecy. And see, this is the way I believe. Some people believe it extends on, and it could, but this is the way I see it. I'm showing you how I see it. All of that is the church age. And it extends into the new heavens. We're going to go through that more today so you'll understand that more. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying. This is a textual variance. And we don't see this in this. You have to go to the ASV. But in the ASV, it says, and one said. So in the King James, it says, and the angel stood, saying. So it's very clear in the King James that this is the angel still speaking. But some people will say, wait a second, in the ASV it says, and one said. But is that right? Which one is right? And that's a question. Which one is right? Well, let me tell you, I don't know which one's right, but I know what the final thing that's right, and I know that the ASV is not right. But I don't know that the King James for sure is right, but I believe it is. And the reason why is because it says in the Greek, if you look at the Greek, it says, there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, saying. So saying means it's a continuation of speech. This word lego is denoting speech in progress. So he's just saying that here is someone saying. So the person who was speaking before at the end, remember we were talking about that in verse 11, it was who was speaking. And he said unto me, who was that? You must prophesy again. That was the angel saying that. Very clear that's the angel. So when you get into verse 1, it only makes sense that what the King James says is right. The angel stood saying. Now you could say maybe the angel stood shouldn't be there, but that's what's in the Greek. It says saying. So I believe the angel stood is probably right, and the other one just missed that part of it. There's no reason why somebody would add that. I think it would be really odd for somebody to add that into the text. So I think the other text just somebody left it out. But regardless, the person speaking is angel. This is really important. And the reason why is because whoever's speaking here is godlike. So this angel had to be God. And that's what I'm saying, or godlike, God, Christ. It's either Christ or it's God speaking. So it's a theophany or a Christophany. Either way, that's who's speaking here. There's no way it can't be. And this is, I'm making this point because this one said, ain't no one said, it's saying. That's a bad translation. So whoever was speaking in chapter 10, verse 11, is still speaking in chapter 11, verse 1. And that's the angel. And there was given to me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. So we know that this angel clothed in a cloud is Jesus. We know that. And he says to rise. Well, why would he tell John to rise? That's because John was down worshiping him, which is another little bit of proof here to show that the angel must have been Jesus or God, or both, which I say. Both. Represents both, but mostly Jesus represents her. And I believe that it's represented. So John is probably prostrate down on his face, or at least kneeling and worshiping him. So this just proves it. Another point that I just wanted to make on this, that this angel clothed in a cloud is Jesus, which I've made a big point on that in chapter 10. But it's obvious when you get here to chapter 11. It's very obvious, but I was waiting for it until we got here to talk about it. So beware the barking dog, people. I've said this so much. This chapter is a prime example of not taking something in the book of Revelation literal. And we know this from the New Testament. We know it. So things we must know in order to understand chapter 11. And I would also say you need to know these in order to understand the New Testament in general. You should know these things. If you don't know these things, you're not going to understand the book of Revelation, chapter 11, that's for sure, and you're not going to understand the New Testament. You need to know these things. These are important things in the New Testament. So the first one is, what can or can't happen in the millennium? That's what we need to know. You need to know what can or can't happen in the millennium. You know what the millennium is? It's from chapter 20. It's the only place that's there. What is Mount Zion? Or Mount Sion? Or the daughter of Zion? Or Zion? What is that? What is the mountain of the Lord? What is the house of the Lord? What is the heavenly Jerusalem? Or the New Jerusalem? What are those? What is the temple of God? Who or what is Israel? And who is this prince in Ezekiel's temple? And what is Ezekiel's temple? So you need to know all these things. You have to know these in order to understand chapter 11. Because what you'll do is you'll get people, the barking dog people, they'll say, oh, just go and look in Ezekiel and it talks all about that. No, it doesn't. It doesn't talk all about that. And I'm going to be going a little bit over that today so that we have a very clear understanding of it. Because a lot of people go through Revelation, they don't go through Ezekiel. And they listen to these preachers who tell them this. Oh, it's in Ezekiel. It talks all about that. No, it doesn't. And I mean, no, it doesn't in the way they say. It does talk about it, but not in the way they say. Okay, so we want to make that clear. So Mount Zion, a lot of people say, well, that's the physical mountain in Jerusalem, but Mount Zion is a spiritual mountain, or the heavenly Jerusalem. Is that true? Are these distinctive just in this way? And no, that is not true. I say they are exactly the same. Zion equals Sion. And I'm going to show that right now. They're the same. It's the same thing. No difference. I'll show you. Here's in a Zechariah, and it says, O daughter of Zion, O daughter of Jerusalem. You can see here he's talking like those two are synonymous with each other too. Zion is synonymous with Jerusalem. The king cometh unto thee, and he's just having salvation, lowly, riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, a foal of an ass. So look at we have Zion here. This is the Z with the Z, Zion. Then you have it in Matthew. It says, Tell ye the daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh unto thee, meek, and sitting on an ass, and a foal of an ass. See this here, we're talking about the exact same. He's quoting this. Matthew's quoting this. And he's using Sion in replace of Zion. They're the same thing. When people try to tell you one's spiritual, one's not, baloney. It's not true. In Joel, we're talking about these, talks about the children of Zion. I am in the midst of Israel. See, you say Israel, the midst of Zion, Zion, Israel, all synonymous. My people shall never be ashamed. He's talking about all these phrases, children of Zion, Israel, all these things are synonymous. They're just another way of saying the same thing. And some people say, well, it's a little bit different in different contexts. It can mean different things. But a lot of time in this apocalyptic imagery, it always means the same thing. He's talking about his people. My people shall never be ashamed. Who? Are you a person of God? Are you the part of the people of God? You got to make up your mind. If you are, you're the children of Zion or Sion, both. All nations flow into Mount Zion. All nations. Well, are you part of all nations? You are. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house, see that mountain, once again, the mountain is figurative thing for what? Mount Zion, all these things, the nations flowing into it. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge among the nations. Who is this? This is he's talking about at the end of time. Who? Or Christ. When Christ comes to earth, he's going to do these things. This can't be some just off-baked person. Or if it was, then it's a type of Christ. It has to be one or the other. But any way you slice it, the mountain of the Lord is where we are. This whole thing is about our identity. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion and he that remaineth in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even every one that is written among the living in Jerusalem. What's that Jerusalem? That's got to be the heavenly Jerusalem. Where are you written? Where's your name written? In the heavenly Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. What is that? That's at the end of time when everyone's been washed clean. It could be when Christ died on the cross. You could look at it that way. And shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem. and from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. And the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion, every dwelling place. That means all the people, and upon her assemblies, a cloud and smoke by day, and a shining and flaming fire by night. And upon all the glory shall be a defense. So this is a reference. He's calling, Isaiah is calling to mind an allusion to what happened in the Exodus, which we looked at this already. It's a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. Who is that? That's Christ. We know Christ. The people are following Christ through the wilderness. We already looked at that. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for covert from the storm and from rain. This is in Micah, and he says in Micah 4:1, he says, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord, see, there you go, those are all those words, those are synonymous. The mountain of the house of the Lord, what is that? That's a church. It's a church in the Old Testament, church in the New Testament, same. Let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob. Who's our God? We believe in the God of Jacob. Jacob's Israel. Same thing, synonymous, same thing, same guy. Law shall go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge among many peoples and rebuke strong nations afar off. Ooh, this is now. When you rebuke, you criticize. That means that we're being able to do that now in the church age. We can do that. We will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. How long is this going to last? Forever and ever. This is the key verse here to it all. Knowing what this is. Hebrews 12:18 and 22:23. These are the key verses. These three verses are key. But ye are not, who's ye? That's you. Ye are not come unto the mount that might be touched, or that might be burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, but ye are come unto Mount Zion, unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. So whenever he's talking about these, whether he's talking about Mount Zion, or he's talking about Mount Zion, or he's talking about the daughter of Zion, or the mountain of the Lord, or the house of the Lord, or the heavenly Jerusalem, or the new Jerusalem, or the temple, all these, or Israel, all these things are synonymous. And we're stuck here at a spot right now where people think that they're not these things. And that's bad. So this verse is so key. But because you're not come to a mountain that might be touched. You've already come. See, you need to know your identity. Where are you? And who are you? So first of all, you need to know who you are. And then you need to know where you are. People don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know either. They're Christians. They're like little babies. They only know the baby stuff. They don't know the big boy stuff. This is the big boy stuff. You could say, oh, this is all literal. Oh, I'm going to take it all literal. And that's baby stuff. You got to know you are not come to the mountain that might be touched. You are not on that mountain. Not on that physical mountain. All of this stuff in the prophets are speaking here, they're figurative. It's all figurative. Spiritual, whatever you want to call it. Spiritual, figurative. It's apocalyptic language. You are not come to that. You are come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God. You're already there. The heavenly Jerusalem, you're already there. You don't have to wait someday in the future. You're already there. You're not the one that gets burnt with fire. None of those things. You're not. The general assembly and church of the firstborn. Who did he write this to? Most people believe he wrote this to the Hebrews. He's calling the people the Hebrews in the church. They're part of the church. This is the thing we need to know. Who are we? We're part of the church. We're just the same like the Hebrews. We're in the church. You should know that. If you don't know that, your names are written in heaven. Where? On New Jerusalem. And to the spirits of just men, this is our spirit. It's not our physical body. We're not physically on Mount Zion. But our spirits are right now. Not someday in the future. Your spirit is right now on Mount Zion. You've already come to it. Your spirit has. You have to know that. You have to know you're already in the heavenly Jerusalem. You're already there. You don't have to wait someday and then it's going to happen. This is in chapter 14 of Revelation. It says, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion. Well, who's with him? The spirits of the just men made perfect. That's who's with him. We're already there. Our spirits are already there. You have to know where you're at. That's where you are. I'm going to talk more about this when we get to chapter 14. But you need to know this. If you don't know this, you won't be able to go through chapter 11. See, that's why we have to go ahead to get things, to understand things when we're at. Because if you don't, you don't know where you're at. Because he talks just briefly about things now, and then he elaborates on them later. John does in Revelation. So chapter 10 and 11 are the transition. We said this. We're going from one place to another. What does that mean? He's showing us this place that we're at. The heavenly Jerusalem, where we already are. He's showing us this place. We're already there. In this chapter, we've moved. The entire Bible is filled with these themes. The already and the not yet. So we've already come to Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. But are we in heaven, in everything, our spirit, soul, and body? No, not totally. But we're already, our spirits are. With the spirits, the just men made perfect. Our spirits are there with their spirits. Also, the other one we need is the old Jerusalem and the new Jerusalem. So we know those themes, because we see in the old Jerusalem and the new Jerusalem. We're in the new Jerusalem now. We're already there. The old Jerusalem is of that time. That's the made with hands. That's the one made with hands. They're not come to that building that was made with hands. So shadows and types. We need to know shadows and types. If you don't know that, you're going to believe these things that these knuckleheads tell you. And I'm telling you that they don't understand shadows and types. They're like little babies. They don't see the shadows and types. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. So these were a shadow. All those things, all those ordinances that they had in the Old Testament of the law were a shadow of what Christ is, the body is. We don't have to think of this and say, oh, well, that was their covenant and our covenant. No, those were a shadow. They were a shadow of our covenant. They were a type of it. But he is that. Christ is that. Some will translate this to say it's the substance. No, it's body. It's the body, but the body is of Christ. That's a proper, you go in the Greek and look at it. So these shadows, see, they're seeing a shadow. So imagine if somebody's walking around the corner and someone's standing on the other side of the corner, that's what they're at. The Old Testament is standing around the corner. They only seen the shadow of Christ. And that's what all those ordinances and stuff were. They're seeing the shadow. We're seeing the person. We see the person. Who are you? This is what you need to know, who you are. You see Christ. You're seeing him. They seen the shadows. They only see the shadows of what Christ is. We see the whole thing. The shadows were the temple, the sacrifices, the holy days, all those are shadows. That's not the real thing. We don't want to look at, why would we look at the shadows still when we can see the person? He's standing right there in front of us. They can only see him, the shadow coming around the corner. We see the person. We see him. See, the Old Testament was the shadow of Christ. These are somebody did these charts showing all things pointing to Christ. See, the tabernacle was a shadow of heavenly things. Just like the Sabbaths and holy days, all those things too. This is who he's talking about. In the context, he's here talking about the Old Testament. And he's saying, who serve unto the example of the shadow of heavenly things. As Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle of God, for see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. So all the things in the Old Testament, all those laws that Moses wrote, and all those things that were shown to him, the Ten Commandments, all those things were shown to him. There was a pattern of the tabernacle. And those were a pattern, like the tabernacle is shown like a pattern of heavenly things. All the ordinances, all the everything inside the temple, the tabernacle, those were all a pattern of heavenly things. They were a shadow, but not the real thing. Christ is the real thing. You see here that somebody made these two lists. And I think it's pretty good. Like see the old covenants of blood of animals, where that was a shadow of Christ, which the blood of Christ was. They're written in stone. The laws are written in our hearts. The shadow, and once again, it's the substance, I should say, body of Christ. You see all these things. Those had an end. This new one has no end. Law of works, law of faith. You see some of these things. I don't agree with all these, but they're pretty good. Pretty good things. For the most part, you could probably say that. For if the first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for a second. If that old covenant law, if that covenant was perfect, you wouldn't need the new one. So you know that the old one's gone. Toast. It's no more. It's another list here. These are talking about people that are types and shadows like Jonah, Moses. Some more things in there. I'm not going to go over them because we're going to go through a lot of this stuff. Some of it. This is Hebrews 9:24. For Christ is not entered into holy places made with hands. Again, that's at holy places. It's not a tabernacle, not a building made with hands. It's not a building made with hands. Which are the figures of the true, but unto heaven itself. That's where Christ went. He didn't go up to some physical building. He went into heaven itself. The heavenly Jerusalem. He's on the throne in heaven, in the throne room. King of kings in the kingdom. All these things I've been through before. We have to know these though. Now to appear in the presence of God for us. He's right there with God. This is the Ezekiel's temple and the other temple, Herod's temple. That's the no. He didn't enter into a place like that. He entered into heaven itself. That's what you need to know. Why? Because that's where the true atonement is. Not the shadow. Those are shadows. Heaven itself is the real. It's the true. There's no reason to go back to the shadow. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never, with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. See, the law couldn't do that because it was just a shadow. It wasn't the real thing. See, when a shadow, I can make my shadow go somewhere, but it can't do anything. But I can do something. Christ can do something. He's the real thing. The shadow can't do anything. It's just showing you something that's going to happen. Can't do anything. A shadow can't do nothing. Does nothing. Christ does it. So we're going to get into this, and these are like two different themes in chapter 11. You're going to see this. The theme one is Old Jerusalem, or the law and the prophets, which is the shadow, and then the New Jerusalem, which is the body of Christ, which is the church. And we're going to get into these and show all the differences and why these are like allusions to this in order to show us what we're really looking at here in chapter 11. We're going to get more into that. But I just wanted to talk about the shadows, the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets are the shadow. It's not the real. The law is a shadow. We just looked at it. We just read it. And there was given unto me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. So this Ezekiel's temple, this is what you hear them say, that this is what we're looking at here, what we just read. They'll say this is Ezekiel's temple. It should have been built. And so is that true? That's what we want to know. Is Ezekiel's temple still going to be built? They draw these elaborate charts, and we've looked at this before. It's Clarence Larkin's chart, and of the covenants. This is key to it all, to knowing this. Is this true? And you see, I redrew it just so we could really see it clearly. I think you can see it clearer than his, because they have bigger text. But you can see right here, they make this little end runaround. They call it the Mosaic covenant or the Palestinian covenant. And it end runs around Jesus. You'll notice even the arrows even go around it. They go around Jesus, so they don't have to go through Jesus. Is that possible? Can you go around it? Can you use the shadow to actually do anything? You can't. So that end run around is false. You see, I'm showing it here again just so you can see it's the same thing. I cleared his all up. So you can see that Mosaic covenant and the Palestinian covenant. It's going around Jesus. Where's Jesus? Jesus is right there. I can't see him very good on this one. That's what Jesus. You can't go around Jesus. He's the real deal. Those are types of shadows. They do nothing. They do nothing. Can't do anything. It's a shadow. Shadow can't do anything. I can't hurt you with my shadow. I can't help you with my shadow. Maybe if the sun's shining on you, I might give you a little bit of shade, but that's about it. Shadow can't do anything. And that's what Paul's point is, and the writer of Hebrews' point is. They want to convince you that you can run around Jesus, or the Jews can. The Jews have some other covenant. Tell you it's false. Right here in Hebrews, it tells you it's false. Sacrifice and offering and burnt offerings and offering for sin, remember that. We're going to talk about that. Thou wouldst not. What is thou wouldst not? You don't want them. Neither has any pleasure therein, which are offered by the law. And he said, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, that he may establish the second. He's talking about covenants. He took away the first covenant, that's the law, the sacrifices, the temple, physical temple. Don't need a, we've come to a heavenly Jerusalem, one that isn't made with hands. Mount Zion, either one, the same. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once. Not over and over, one time. They're not to do it again. So we're looking here at the covenants. This is Clarence Larkin's chart, dispensational chart, the greatest book in the world on dispensational truth. I don't think so. The writer of Hebrews is denying what they're saying. He's saying that he took away the first, that's the first covenant, that he may establish the second. The second is Christ. See, right in between there is Jesus. Who's in between there? Jesus. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father except by me. So he took away the first that he may establish the second. So that end run around is false. Can't be there. There's no other covenant. There's one covenant. He took away that covenant. That covenant, see, that little end run around is coming from where? The law. That's a covenant he made on Mount Sinai. That covenant is gone. He did away with it. He took it away. That he may establish the second. This is what Jesus said right before the Olivet Discourse. He said, your house is left unto you desolate. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stonest them which are sent unto thee. How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth, till ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. What does that mean? Jesus said, you will not see me if you don't accept me and say, I came in the name of the Lord. Isn't that salvation message? Is to believe in Jesus Christ? Say that he is. Anybody that doesn't say Jesus came in the flesh is Antichrist. That's the whole message. That once you say Jesus is Lord, you become a Christian. That's the whole idea of it. Because you make Jesus your Lord and become a disciple, you're basically a Christian. That is, you're a Christian. Not basically, you are a Christian. If you make Jesus your Lord, that's what he's saying. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. He's saying, if you make me your Lord, then that's the way you're going to get saved. Other than that, you're toast. You're desolate. Your house is left desolate. You don't have a house. Never have a house. It's left desolate. The only house they get is when they accept Christ. Then, when they say, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord, they become part of Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the tabernacle that's not made with hands. Then they do have a house. But until then, they have a desolate house, a worthless house. They don't have there's no physical house no more. So in the Olivet Discourse, he says, see these great buildings? There shall not be one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Tell him, I'm going to destroy this temple. This temple's being destroyed. And he said exactly when he's doing it. In 40 years, exactly 40 years it happened. We know that. So what is the temple in the New Testament? The temple, I'm talking the real temple. Not the shadow, the real temple. He said, Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. What is he talking about? The temple of his body. His body is a temple. There's no old temple going to be rebuilt. He just said how he's going to rebuild the temple. It's his body. The body of Christ is what's being built. There are not two brides or two ways. I've been through this before. There's one covenant, one bride, one body of Christ, one church, one body of Christ, one Lord, one God, one faith. Ephesians 4:4. There's one body and one Spirit, even as we are called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. There's only one. There's not two covenants. There's not another covenant. There's one covenant. There's one body, one Spirit. You're not two separated out, no end runarounds. So this is what they convince you, that there's going to be this, in the millennium, there's going to be a new temple built, or even in the tribulation, we'll say. They're going to rebuild this temple in the tribulation period, the 7 years prior to the millennium. And then in the millennium, this prince is going to be living in Ezekiel's temple. The prince. So who is the prince in Ezekiel's temple? This is something you have to know. A lot of people don't know this, and this is why it's so important that you study this. I know that I'm going through a lot of stuff here, but you have to know who the prince is in Ezekiel's temple. If you don't know who that is, you're lost. You're easily fooled by them. They can deceive you and say, oh, if you go into Ezekiel, it talks all about rebuilding that temple, blah, blah, blah. And you have to believe them because you didn't study. You didn't thoroughly think about these verses. And I'm going to show you them right now.